I wanted to open, I have a reading for you guys because there's some stuff going on in the outside world. I just wanted to give you a little glimpse because I think sometimes I take for granted the things that I've learned over the years, and I assume because I said it once or twice or put it in a podcast, it's like everyone knows. And as that keeps coming back to me, like, no, they don't. You have to explain it to them. You have to bring out the document. You have to show them the thing. So I brought 2 books to class this morning, and I'm going to click over so you guys can see it full screen. This is Public Opinion by Walter Lippmann, and this is the first reading we're going to do. It's a shorter one. Then I'll get to the other one. This is not a first edition. This is a reprint. And let's see if we can get to the date. It says 2007. I believe it was first printed in 1928, but we can get to the facts in a minute. Here's the table of contents. The world outside and the pictures in our heads. And then I want to get to the quote. So this is part 2. Approaches to the world outside. Let me see if I can do this. You can see me and we can read at the same time. Without some form of censorship, propaganda in the strict sense of the word is impossible. In order to conduct a propaganda, there must be some barrier between the public and the event. Access to the real environment must be limited before anyone can create a pseudo-environment that he thinks wise or desirable. For while people have access to, people who have direct access can misconceive what they see, no one else can decide how they shall misconceive it unless he can decide where they shall look and for what. The military censorship is the simplest form of barrier, but by no means is the most important because it is known to exist and therefore in certain measure agreed to and discounted. All right, so what is Mr. Lippmann saying in that clip? As far as you know, it's a clip because you just saw it through me reading. All right, in that paragraph, what is Mr. Lippmann writing? What is he saying? He's saying, hey, whoa. Before you can go propagandizing people, you have to have censorship, okay? And people know about national security, so it can't just be national security that's used as censorship. Now, since the 2016 election, specifically 1 week after that election, the leaked Google meeting of the executives of the people who direct most of the consciousness of planet Earth through their little algorithms, they were lamenting the presidential election. They said they would never let it happen again. They took measures to start censoring people who could tell people about the propaganda that they were going to put out in a couple years. So from 2016 forward, for the past 4 years, they've been blacklisting, deep sixing, censoring, demonetizing, deplatforming, and banning people across the board. I talked about this in 2017. It was enough of a trend that I did a public speech on it. I haven't done many public speeches. That was a topic of a public speech. I said, they are doing this. They're going to continue doing this. And once they do that, it clears the table and they can put anything on there and people will believe it. Because you take out the dissent, you take out the people who say and fact check for real, they can say anything. And that's what Lippmann put out. So this book right here, let me put back on screen here. This book, Public Opinion, is a manual for psychological warfare to be used by robber barons and corporations and militaries and governments against the individuals, against you. So when Tim Pool asks Alex Jones, Alex, who is they? They are the people who follow this doctrine of sophism above truth, of lying to you to have a power differential, to gain power. They occult or hide information, and that gives them a power differential, which is a wealth differential, which is how they control the world. So I'm going to tell you who they are, and I'm going to tell you how they control you through media and how they censor so it clears the way so you don't see anything but their propaganda. And everyone around you who's not aware, who's not conscious, who's not asking questions, who's not using their 5 senses to validate their reality, they're under control, literally. So, oh, I lost audio. It's not $1 billion studio. And look what we can do anyway. All right, this one. This is it right here. Propaganda. This is Eddie Bernays. This is also not a first edition, but let's break into it anyway and see what it says. 1928. So public opinion was written in 1921 because I know the two dates. I just always mix them up. Copyright 1928, Edward L. Bernays, renewed 1955 by Bernays, and then Mark Crispin Miller, who is a commentator and author. He republished this with his foreword, which I have to say, let me just show you the table of contents. We're going to start where they're organizing chaos, and we're not going to cover the new propaganda. We're going to hit the beginning and the end part so you can get the bookend on it and see why you might want to dip into this book. It doesn't take very long to read, and most people around you have read it. At least the people in power have read it. They use this. This is their manual. All right, so introduction. It's very interesting. It's lengthy. Not going to go over it here. Organizing chaos, and this is something I should make sure I read for every season, because if I send you out of this course and you don't know this, then you don't know much about how the world works. So let's dig into it. Chapter 1 of Propaganda, 1928, by Edward Bernays, Organizing Chaos. I don't want to write in this book, so I'm going to do it this way. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. So he's not saying controlling people's minds is only what totalitarians and despots do. He says organizing other people's habits and their thoughts is part of democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is the logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. Our invisible governors are, in many cases, unaware of their identity, unaware of the identity of their fellow members in the inner cabinet, meaning they don't know who each other are. They're just doing their jobs because that's what they do. They do it for money and power. They govern us by their qualities of natural leadership, their ability to supply needed ideas, and by their key position in the social structure. Whatever the attitude one chooses toward this condition, it remains a fact that in almost every aspect of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons, a trifling fraction of our 120 million, that's how many people were in America back in 1928, who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind, who harness the old social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world. It is not usually recognized how necessary these invisible governors are to our orderly functioning of our group life. In theory, every citizen may vote for whom he pleases. Our Constitution does not envisage political parties as a part of the mechanism of government, and its framers seem not to have pictured to themselves the existence in our national politics of anything like the modern political machine. But the American voters soon found that without organization and direction, their individual votes cast perhaps for hundreds or for dozens or hundreds of candidates would produce nothing but confusion. Invisible government in the shape of rudimentary political parties arose almost overnight. Ever since then, we have agreed, for the sake of simplicity and practicality, that party machines should narrow down the field of choice to two candidates, or at most 3 or 4. In theory, every citizen makes up his mind on public questions and matters of private conduct. In practice, if all men had to study for themselves the abstruse economic, political, and ethical data involved in every question, they would find it impossible to come to a conclusion without anything. We have voluntarily agreed to let an invisible government sift the data and high spot, or to point out, the outstanding issue so that our field of choice shall be narrowed to practical proportions. From our leaders and the media they use to reach the public, we accept the evidence and the demarcation of issues bearing upon public question. For some ethical teacher, be it a minister, a favorite essayist, or merely prevailing opinion, we accept a standardized code of social conduct to which we conform most of the time. In theory, everyone buys the best and the cheapest commodities offered in the market. In practice, if everyone went around pricing and chemically tasting before purchasing the dozens of soaps or fabrics or brands in which are for sale, economic life would be hopelessly jammed. So because they don't want things to be jammed up, they have to control your mind through these forms of propaganda. Now, let me also pick up this one piece that's back here at the end, because it is also apropos to our current real-time events going on outside this course. Page 73. Propaganda, like economics and sociology, can never be an exact science for the reason that its subject matter, like theirs, deals with human beings. So they're saying human beings are kind of hard to control. If you can influence the leaders, either with or without their conscious cooperation, you automatically influence the group which they sway. So you want to censor, you want to influence a big million, audience, person with million, you censor them. That also has sway. But men do not need to be actually gathered together in a public meeting or in a street riot to be subject to the influences of mass psychology, because man is by nature gregarious and he feels himself to be a member of the herd, even when he is alone in his room with the curtains drawn under quarantine. I'm sorry, I added that part. His mind retains the patterns which have been stamped on it by the group influence. A man sits in his office deciding what stocks to buy. He imagines, no doubt, that he is planning his purchases according to his own judgment. In actual fact, his judgment is a melange of impressions stamped on his mind by the outside influences which unconsciously control his thought. He buys a certain railroad stock because it was in the headlines yesterday, and hence it is one which comes most prominently to his mind, because he a pleasant recollection he has. That's what it's supposed to be. He has a pleasant recollection of a good dinner with on one of its fast trains, because it has a liberal labor policy, a reputation for honesty, because he has been told that JP Morgan owns some of its shares. Trotter and LeBon, two earlier propagandist authors teaching people how to do this, or at least in LeBon's case, pointing it out, concluded that the group mind does not think in the strict sense of the word. There's another typo. Look at that. We found two typos during that reading. Shame on you, Mark Crispin Miller. You need to hire us to proofread your documents. Let's see. Is there one more part to this? It just basically says people aren't thinking for themselves, not because they just haven't been taught how to think, not just because they've been schooled and indoctrinated, but because the source from which they think they get their clean water is providing them toxic information. People are going to media sources. We call them the legacy media now. They're going to the media sources thinking they're getting the news they need to make decisions and choices in their lives, without understanding what that terrain is, that layer of legacy news that's out there is there specifically to disinform you according to their own rule books. There's many of these. Like, we can bring out Trotter and LeBon next time. There are many people who have written about how to use words and pictures and images to control people's minds through media. And we are not the originators of that. We are the discoverers of these artifacts and purveyors of this information back to the public. I doubt anyone knew that in 1928, except the people doing it against all of our grandparents. Okay, so this has been going on for a long time, but now we're at a point where they've dumbed down the public enough, where they've made the gap between what can be seen through our five senses and what is claimed in reality. It's a huge gap. They're polarizing people who are getting more and more extreme on both, like either side. I saw a live stream yesterday of a protest in Dallas, and because they were carrying guns, whoever was live streaming or restreaming that, they got banned from YouTube because that violates the policy, right? But I also saw riots in DC and all these other places last night where there's like peaceful demonstrations intersected with paramilitary groups dressed in black, throwing bombs, doing all sorts of violence that's not going to be disavowed by the party that's about to be given power. So what I see is a powder keg and a bunch of people like sparking off matches and throwing them near it. And if we don't learn to be able to articulate what we're seeing to other people through a meeting like Autonomy Toasters helps you with your communication, or a Benny Wills course like Parrhesia that helps you strategically with your communication and these type of skills, or even just practicing in the role play in here and using specific instances that you bring from life. Like, hey, I had a coworker who said this. How can I position myself? So I'm Switzerland. I'm not going to aggress against you, but I'm definitely not going to take your shit because I'm Switzerland. Switzerland's like the quintessential place of don't tread here, don't tread on them, right? That's the international neutrality idea. Not even saying that's all true because they store a lot of people's money who go to war with each other. But these ideas that the media makes decisions for us and we follow those decisions, it's 100 years old. I mean, because public opinion was 1921. So in a couple months, they'll have been practicing these black magic ideas, word magic ideas on the public without the public knowing about it. And what kind of deleterious effects? If you had a time machine and we went back to 1921 and said, hey, we're going to unleash this type of technology on an unwitting public, and we're going to couple that with taxation so all their money goes to places they don't even see, that builds up a big power vacuum that needs to be filled either with our knowledge and raising of our intelligence, or they're going to do it by lowering the boom on freedom. And so that's why I wanted to bring those books out. There's a lot of other books I could bring to bear, but that seems to be directly the thing that's causing people to fight right now in public, is that both sides, it used to be a Venn diagram. Do you guys know what a Venn diagram is? Like you have a circle and another circle, and there's some things that overlap. Right now, one side believes this, and they're totally convinced. Another side believes this, they're totally convinced. Those circles do not overlap anymore. So you have people living in a bifurcated reality, a reality where, depending on who you're talking to, I mean, this was evident with doctors 6 months ago, where they're asking patients, how do you vote? And they're like, why do you care? Well, I could give you hydroxychloroquine for this, but if you were anti-Trump, you're going to throw a fit. And then I give people this, which is less effective, but it still works. That's a conversation that was had with a graduate of this class and a doctor, because medicine became politicized. So when they're able to do this, first off, well played. You guys are smart. You got business plans. You got funding. You didn't have any resistance. You censor your resistance. You take away people's, like, how could they not win in this situation? They have set up a rigged game, and anybody who has tried to tell the public this basically gets, you can say it over there, buddy. Say it over there. I've had 35,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel for like a couple years, I think. So I'm all set with looking at, is the message getting out? I just put it out. It's up to everybody else to say, if this is useful, I'm going to share it with other people before they censor it. That's how it has to be. Like, I can't go to war with Google and YouTube. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. But what I can do is subvert that message using their platform kind of subtly, and just keep doing it. Keep dripping it out there. Do it consistently. That's what wins the race. It's not a sprint. It's a super marathon. They're playing it like a sprint. They're moving as fast as they can right now to take away people's freedom. And you're going to see a lot of different things go on before they even claim America's next president. So with all that cleared in the air, who's got a question, comment, concern for this Sunday Q&A?